Good morning, members, officers, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this meeting of the Licensing Committee regarding today's hearings. I'll just pass to our clerk, Michelle Cutler, with regards to our housekeeping.
Thank you, Chair. Please note that this meeting of the Licensing Committee is being recorded by the Council for live broadcast and will be published on the Council once. In order to ensure the meeting is managed effectively, please could everyone present follow these ground rules for speaking. Only speak when invited to by the state your name before you have not been introduced by name. Please ensure unmute yourself and always turn on the video function before speaking. Mute your phone when you are not talking. After each party has made their representation, the chair will ask each person in turn if they have any questions or comments. However, if at any point you would like to speak again, please use the raise your hand function at the top right. Finally, please ensure background noise is kept to a minimum and mobile phones and other devices are silent for the duration of the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. So apologies. We have apologies from Councillors Anderson and Councillors Flagg, and also to advise that Mr. Perkoff, who was one of our representatives who was to attend, has given apologies. He won't be attending today, but his colleagues, I'm sure, will cover all the points. Declarations of interest. Now, this is a flow chart in your agenda pack, page 2, with regard to information. Can I ask, please, anybody who has a declaration of interest to use that raised hand icon? I'll just check down the line. We have no declarations of interest, and I have none either, thank you. So, protocol for public speaking. We note the revised protocol for public speaking due to COVID, and this is at agenda item 3. So we go on to our first application, which is an application for variation of premises licence for beach wedding area, West Beach, Bournemouth. The application is brought before the Licensing Committee for determination. So can I just check with everybody that you have received the appropriate supplementaries, which are additional evidence from our applicant and additional information from our representatives, the 2 appendices. So to introduce everybody, my name is Councillor Jude Svat. I'm Chairman of the Licensing Committee and I'm Chair of this particular committee for our hearings. So I will move on to Councillor Julie Bagwell. Is Councillor Julie Bagwell with us? Oh, unfortunately, she's not. And just to advise that I am Ward Councillor for Creekmore, Hilborn and Waterloo. It would be good to hear from members which wards they cover. So unfortunately, Julie hasn't been able to join us, but we'll move on. Councillor David Brown.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, Councillor David Brown. I'm a ward member for Bearwood and Merley ward. Thank you.
Councillor Richard Burton.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Councillor Richard Burton. I'm also a ward member for Bearwood and Merley ward.
Thank you, Richard. Councillor Brian Dion.
Councillor Brian Dion, Penhill.
Thank you, Brian. Councillor Bobby Duff.
Councillor Bobby Duff for Little Down and Iford.
Thank you, Bobby. Councillor Norman Decent.
Councillor Norman Decent, ward councillor for Kinston and West Howe.
Thank you. Can I ask you to put your videos on when you're speaking, please, so that we can see?
My apologies.
That's okay, no worries. It isn't always easy to do. It's just for public record. Thank you. Councillor George Farquhar.
Councillor George Farquhar and I represent Oscar Measton and Puxton.
Thank you, George. Councillor Dwayne Farr. Councillor Farr, if you'd just like to introduce yourself.
Councillor Dwayne Farr for Kinston ward. Thank you.
Thank you, Dwayne. Thank you. Councillor Andy Hadley.
Kinston ward. Thank you.
Councillor Andy Hadley, Pooltown ward.
And
Councillor Toby Johnson, Alderney and Bourne Valley ward.
Thank you, Toby. Councillor David Kelsey.
Yeah, Councillor Kelsey, Eastcliff and Springbourne.
Thank you, David. And Councillor Lawrence Williams.
Councillor Lawrence Williams, Little Down and Iford.
Thank you, Lawrence. Could we please add Councillor Julie? Apologies, Michelle, thank you. Now we move on to our officers, and we have Nananka Randall.
Good morning, I'm Nananka Randall. I'm the licensing manager for BCP Council.
Morning, Nananka. And Sarah Rogers.
Good morning, Sarah Rogers, Senior Licensing Officer, BCP Council.
Thank you, Sarah. And on behalf of the applicant, we have Helen Wildman.
Good morning, Helen Wildman, Event Manager, BCP Council.
And we also have assisting Noel Oliver.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, Noel Oliver, Contract and Commercial Manager for BCP.
Thank you, Noel. And we also have our responsible authorities with us today, Sergeant Gareth Gosling.
Good morning, Chair. Sergeant Gareth Gosling, Drug and Alcohol Harm Reduction Team.
Thank you, Gareth. And Matthew Taylor.
Good morning, Chair. Matthew Taylor, Senior Environmental Health Officer for BCP Council.
Thank you very much. And our representatives, we have Peter Chadwick, Mr. Peter Chadwick.
Yes, good morning. I'm a Bournemouth resident.
Good morning, Mr. Chadwick. And Mr. Eric Wally. I don't think Mr. Wally's with us, though, is he? He hasn't managed to join us yet. So we'll bring him in as soon as he arrives. And Mr. Peter Woolwick.
Yes, good morning. I'm a part-time resident of Riviera, 63 Grove Road, Bournemouth.
Good morning to you, and thank you for that. And now we move on to our legal officer, Tanya Coulter.
Thank you, Chair. Tanya Coulter, Senior Solicitor, advising the Licensing Committee today.
Thank you, Ms. Coulter. And our clerk, Michelle Cutler.
Good morning, and I'm your clerk for today.
Thank you, Michelle. You'll keep us all in hand, I'm sure. And in addition to all those individuals, we have Democratic Services officers who are providing technical support behind the scenes, but they won't be taking part in the hearing. So before I run through the procedure, I'd just like to ask if everybody's given notice of their intention to speak has been identified. I think we have. And anybody who wants to withdraw at this stage with regard to representation or doesn't wish to speak now raises their hand to advise me. I have nothing, right. OK, we'll take that as read. I will now explain the proposed procedure for the meeting. The licensing officer, Sarah Rogers, will present the report. Our applicant, Helen Wildman, will then make the application. Questions of the applicant by all parties, our members of the committee will go first, and then all other parties have an opportunity to ask questions. The responsible authorities and other persons, which is our representatives, will then make their representatives in turn. And there'll be an opportunity for all other parties to ask questions. And then we will go on to all parties will have an opportunity to sum up with the party who spoke last to go first. The hearing will then conclude. The committee will deliberate in private at some stage with the legal advisor and clerk present, and notification of the committee's decision will be given within a period of 5 working days. This is due to COVID restrictions, with the day or the last day on which the hearing was held in accordance with the regulations. The notification of decision will include information about the right of appeal as appropriate. So before I continue, I'll just ask all parties present just to agree that they're happy with that procedure. Nananka Randall.
Happy, Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nananka. Sarah Rogers.
Yes, sorry. Yes.
OK, don't worry. We'll all have trouble with our mics. Not a problem. Thank you, Sarah. Helen Wildman.
Yes, thank you, Chair.
And Noel Oliver.
Yes, thank you, Chair.
And Sergeant Gosling.
Yes, happy, Chair. Thank you.
And Matthew Taylor. Matthew, are you content? OK, I can see you nodding. And Mr. Chadwick?
Yes.
Thank you. We don't have Mr. Whaley at the moment. And Mr. Woolwick?
Yes, I'm content, Chair.
Thank you. OK, just as an addendum, Matt Taylor, as a responsible authority for environmental health, is not presenting any objection, as conditions have been agreed to mitigate these. However, as chair, I believe he may be able to assist in providing information as to why conditions were applied. I'll therefore ask him to answer any relevant questions pertinent to his area as a responsible authority. And please may I remind all parties speaking to give their submissions within the 4 relevant licensing objectives. And just to remind us all, the prevention of crime and disorder, public safety, prevention of public nuisance and protection of children from harm. If any speaker does inadvertently stray from these objectives, I'll gently remind them as morning, and the committee wishes to hear from all relevant objectors. Finally, all questions are to be asked through the chair, who will indicate the best person to respond to those questions, and there will be no cross-examination of parties. Before we just start, I'd just like to advise the representatives that we have here today. They were here at yesterday's hearings with regards to Eastcliff and Toft's speech, and they may have very well seen in the echo this morning that they were indeed granted. And we just wanted to give an assurance to those representatives that we were extremely stiff in our deliberations, and we were able to apply conditions which meant that only 5 events could happen on at those particular sites during the year. We also took on board that it was extremely important for residents living within that area that appropriate notices be posted, and in future appropriate notices will, so that there'll be easy access and information. We also had the offer, of course, from a local ward councillor who would provide information with regard to numbers, so that if there were any issues that did arise from this licence being granted, you would be able to contact that number immediately and deal with it. So I just felt it was very important that, as it was in the Echo, that you were personally advised. And the committee worked very hard to ensure that it was heavily conditioned and mitigated. We were very impressed by the wealth of knowledge and information that we received from our representatives, and we wanted to be able to counter that by ensuring that we had the safest licence possible to be granted. So I hope that's helpful. So I'll move on now for the first item, which is the beach wedding area at agenda item 4, and I'll ask our licensing officer, Sarah Rogers, if she'd present the report. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you. The application before you is for variation of an area of the beach called the beach wedding area, currently licensed under Cliff Drive, to enable it to be used for events other than beach weddings to enhance the existing offering for the main season. Application has been made by the Service Director for Destination and Culture on behalf of BCP Council, who's represented today by BCP's Event Manager and Seafront Contracts Manager. Application is made for live and recorded music timings from 10 AM to 10 PM to add the provision of plays, films, indoor sporting events and the performance of scope of regulated entertainment already permitted, and to add the supply of alcohol sold between the hours of 10 AM and 10 PM from April to September. It should, however, be noted that the current licence already allows licensable activities for beach weddings from 5 AM to 11:30 PM, and believe that the applicants would like this to remain the case. The change in timings, therefore, may be for any other event, but we need to establish this during the course of the hearing. It was agreed during the course of the consultation period that alcohol shall only be sold with food, and the off-sale provision is now no longer sought. Conditions have been offered by the applicant in the operating schedule, which will be imposed onto the licence if granted. In addition, further conditions have been agreed following mediation with environmental health to aid the prevention of public nuisance. These conditions are set out in Appendix 4 of my report. Dorset Police have agreed conditions at Appendix 5 with the applicant, but their representation has not been withdrawn at this time. In view of the conditions agreed with Dorset Police, Bournemouth Town Watch and one other person confirmed the withdrawal of their representations. These are the representations at page 4 and 45 of Appendix 3. Therefore, committee members are requested to have regard to the representation made by Dorset Police and 14 other persons who are concerned that the application will not uphold any of the licensing objectives. Should these conditions prove not to be successful, the applicant is aware that any of the responsible authorities or any other person may request a review of the time. No representations were received from any of the other responsible authorities. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sarah. So I will open up. Are there any questions of fact from members for Sarah with regard to her report? And I'm looking for hands. This is from members. Thank you, members. Councillor Hadley, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not sure whether this is really for the applicant rather than for Sarah, but it is in her report. It talks about the existing licence applying outside of the times that are now being applied for.
Yeah, you're quite right. That would be for the applicant. Apropos to previous information. Yes, that would be the applicant. Okay. Thank you so much for raising. Thank you. Okay, so do we have any questions from our responsible authorities with regard to the application report? No. Okay, so moving on then, we have Mr. Chadwick, you have a question. Thank you.
Yes, please. I'm a bit confused about what is the existing license. Can I just ask Sarah, there's documents starting on page 31 through to page 39. Are all of those pages the existing license?
Well, Mr. Chadwick, with respect, I think this is a matter for the applicant to advise exactly as to what are the requirements, because it's quite detailed, and we can ask the applicant for you.
Can I ask my question then on the assumption that that is correct? On page 39, it would appear that the existing application is for the limited area shown on page 39. Sorry, the existing license is for the area shown on page 39. The application has a drawing which is much larger, page 30. So is the real change taking place here a change in area?
Again, Mr. Chadwick, we'll revert to the applicant because our legal officer puts forward a report based on that information, and the applicant will have the minutiae of detail for you. So we will take that question in case, and if you'd like to put it to the applicant after he's given his submission, I'm sure he'll be able to assist, because we are all of the same mind that there are lots of questions to be asked with regard to some discrepancies and details which are further required.
Okay, thank you.
I hope that's helpful. Thank you very much, Mr. Chadwick. If you pop your hand down, thank you. Okay. That's right. Okay. Thank you very much. Your hand's still up, Mr. Chadwick. You're still waving at me. That's lovely. Thank you. So if there are no further questions from members or anyone, thank you very much, Sarah, for your report. So I'll now ask Helen if she will put forward her presentation. Helen Wildman, thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. So as outlined, this application is for a variation to an existing premise licence that's been in operation since 2011 and has previously been used for the hosting of beach weddings. Just for clarity, the contract for beach weddings has currently expired. We are not currently retendering that at this time, partly with restrictions. It's come to its natural end, so it's not currently being retendered. Once we've done this season, then we will review whether that happens in the future. We look to retender that option and revert back to it in the future. We wish to include other licensable activities, so looking to be able to host outdoor events should we get an application, but predominantly the purpose for applying for it is to have the opportunity for this season to use the site as a temporary pop-up restaurant facility for the summer season. The change of the supply of alcohol on this application is there is currently alcohol on the application which is in form of a celebratory drink as part of a wedding. We want to be able to vary that for that season of April till September to be able to be used as part of that restaurant facility. As we said yesterday, this is about promoting a modern, contemporary resort, but making sure it's safe and responsible. And it's very much the offering is a restaurant facility. It's about responsible hospitality. To go within that. A copy of the tender specification is in your pack, so that will demonstrate and show what measures we've asked for when looking for applications. In terms of the site's on is fully on the beach, and to clarify on the music times that we are looking for. 10 till 10 for events, leaving the option to return to the weddings in the future. The team have had this premise license for some time, since 2011, and we also manage 23 other outdoor premise license spaces across the BCP. A list of them can be found in the pack. And this demonstrates that we've never had these called in for review, so we always make sure that we are covering those license objectives when we are looking after these areas. addition, in terms of our experience, we oversee approximately 500 events across the BCP area. They do range in complexity. And as part of the training, there's qualifications in the events industry, in health and safety, and also all of the team do undergo a personal licence holder's qualification to ensure they understand the complexity of licensing when they are looking at these applications. We do have a detailed event process, and the information, the initial guidance that's given to organisers can be found in your packs. And that gives you a little bit of an overview of the process of the event management process, and what we're looking for the summer offering of restaurants. We'll go through that process. So it covers off all of the logistical elements to ensure that that event is self-contained, doesn't put a pressure on the other area. And then from that initial application, there's various stages that an application will go through before there is authorisation for it to go ahead, and that same process would go through for the restaurant offering. So large events have to compile a detailed event management plan, and that we then scrutinise and look through, and we have a monthly multi-agency safety advisory group where the responsible authorities and other various departments and agencies come together and look at those plans to make sure that they cover off all the safety elements for an event, and in this case, for the purpose of the licensing objectives. They all pull together. Anything with alcohol has a separate alcohol management plan. We also have an on-call process for any large events, and we also have the seafront operations team on site for the summer operation, so that there is a point of contact, and I believe those numbers were distributed yesterday. In terms of mediating this licence, we've worked very hard with Dorset Police in order to work to some conditions that both them and ourselves feel that make sure that we cover those licensing objectives. And in particular, Sergeant Gosling, we've gone backwards and forwards to try and agree them. We've also worked with environmental health to ensure that there isn't any undue noise disruption, and have agreed changes in terms of conditions on the licence to make sure that noise is managed. We're aware, obviously, there have been representations for this site, and we've sent out some initial information to the inquiries and representations to try and give some further insight into what we were looking to deliver, and then where as much as possible we've then responded to additional questions. Some of these weren't in relation to the licensing objectives, but we've tried to answer as best as we can at this stage. A lot of concerns raised, understandably, from residents are covered in terms of that event management process, which is a very detailed process as an industry standard, and it follows along the HSE guidelines for events. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Helen. You'll understand there's going to be quite a few questions for you, so please don't feel bullied in any way. They are merely questions for the purposes of looking at this application. Thank you very much indeed. Members, now open the floor for questions with regard to the applicant. If you'd like to indicate, please, and then I can see who wishes to speak. We'll take our members first. Others will get the opportunity, of course. Okay, Councillor Hadley, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Helen, thank you. I understand from what you've just said that the wedding venue it won't be used as a wedding venue, or isn't intended to be used as a wedding venue in the near future. But I was confused on the application by the suggestion, and it's mentioned several times, that that 10 to 10 it would be open as a restaurant, and outside these times it would be available as a wedding venue, which makes it either very early morning weddings or very late evening weddings. And I'm not sure that's really what you intended. So perhaps you give us a little bit of support on that, because clearly that doesn't seem to be right. Thank you.
Yes, if we could have some clarity on those timings, please. and the verbiage on the application wasn't as helpful as it could have been when you were asking for addition. It could have been extension, might have been a better word used, because you were extending some hours on one side of the day and you were curtailing them on the other. So it's just easy verbiage for people to understand. But it'd be grateful if you could ask that answer, the response to that, please, on behalf of the committee. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, apologies for the confusion. So it would be one or the other in terms of what we wanted to do with the variation is to have the opportunity to be able to do the beach weddings in the future if we wanted to. But they wouldn't. You wouldn't have a wedding in the morning and then be going and then having the restaurant operation. So hopefully that clears that up for you, Councillor Hadley.
Thank you. I don't have any other member to speak, but I do have an addition there. We have got the anomaly of the the October month. So you don't have a contract in place, but there's still an ability there for weddings to take place in the October month. But they don't have the, do they or do they not have, I'm looking at the previous license, and it is a license for the sale of alcohol, supply of alcohol from 5 in the evening till 11:30. I take that that's all types of alcohol. You talked about a celebratory drink. What type of license are we talking about in that instance?
Chair, I'm just going to pass it. Noel will be able to answer that as he manages that site.
Okay. This is for the month of October.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, the current premise licence does run through to the end of October. There is a condition on the current premise licence that alcohol shall be by form of champagne only.
Very nice. Okay, that's a very nice condition. Okay, that's lovely. Thank you very much. There are no other members wish to speak at this moment. I've just got a chair's chat. I'll just have a quick check what that says. Is there something in the chat? No, there isn't. Okay, so going back to our speakers then, opening now to the responsible authorities. Do you have any questions for?
Gareth Gosling, Dorset Police, no questions, Madam
No.
Chair.
Okay, thank you. And Matthew, do you have any questions? I know you're not here as a party per se, but it may be helpful.
No, I have no questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now on to our representatives. Mr. Woolwick, thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. Good morning, Helen. I just have a few questions for you, if I may. The email that Amy Harris sent to me on the 29th of March was a common form email designed to allay concerns of those who had raised objections. In relation to other events, on page 2 of the email, it was stated that there are currently no plans for any events, and that the purpose of the licenses is to be able to offer the seafront catering experience, which had been detailed earlier in the email. Does that remain the position so far as this particular site is concerned?
Thank you. Yes, so currently there isn't any application in for an event on this site. For us, in terms of variation and the process that we go through, as we all experienced yesterday, it allows us by adding in that multi-use that we will be able to if an event came in and it was deemed suitable and it went through all those processes, that we could look at it. But predominantly for this season, what we are looking for would be to have to operate the site for that temporary restaurant.
And in terms of other events, it would follow, therefore, would it not, that you're not able to give details to this committee as to the precise nature, type and frequency of any proposed activities other than restaurant?
Yes, that would be correct. So in terms of an event, until an application comes in, we have to assess each one differently, and the reason we have to do that is to make sure that they're competent to put this event on, and to make sure that we cover off all of those necessary parts of an event management process in order for it to take place. So where one setup or layout may be right for one person, it wouldn't necessarily suit and could hinder a different event. So it's very much taking each event on its weight, and that's where we have that industry standard of the safety advisory group process and event management plans to make sure that that they are safe events.
The final point is this. I'm sure you appreciate the concern of both full and part-time residents as to the wide-ranging nature of the variation proposed. Do you accept that there should be, if the committee is minded to grant the application, a limitation on the number of events on the site?
I think that would very much be up to the licensing committee to decide once they've heard everything today, taking each separate application in its own merit.
Well, I'd like to give you an opportunity of commenting on that point in relation to this specific site. Do you have any observations for the committee?
In terms of, as I said, we don't have we haven't got a whole list of events planned for it, so it doesn't it doesn't necessarily restrict us. So yes, it would. If that's what the committee decided, then we would work to that. So there isn't events that have requested the site. Our plan is, as you know, we've been transparent in the hearings, is what we're looking at of the restaurant offering. I think the purpose of a license, just having that flexibility and understanding that there's a very rigorous event management process in place, just allows for it changing as time goes on. So that would be my only point on it. Is, times change. We're all coming out of a very unknown period into the new world, so we don't know what the future holds in terms of events, in terms of weddings. So it's just having that flexibility, really.
Yes, but yes, finally, do you understand that flexibility that you're referring to, and has been referred to by Amy Harris in the correspondence, is what's given rise to very considerable concerns on the part of both full-time and part-time residents?
Yes, I think I can answer that on Helen's behalf. This is very much a committee matter, Peter, with regard to our deliberations as to whether, after we've heard the matter, as to whether we feel limiting the number of events would be appropriate. I think that Helen was trying to help us with the specific type of events, and it got lost in the ether there a little bit. Yes. But we've certainly I've made that note, and I'm sure members have too, and that will be a consideration for us.
Thank you very much indeed. I have no further questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Welbeck. So now we go on to Mr. Chadwick. Thank you.
Good morning. Helen, can you confirm that the area in the current licence application is about 3 times as large as the area in the existing licence?
Yeah, I'm going to, Noel Oliver's going to respond to that one, so I'll just turn the camera.
Thank you, Chair. My apologies. It looks in the application that the site map is much bigger than the existing. It's not our intention to increase. So we're looking to work with the existing designated area, which is approximately 25 metres by 15.
So can I ask the Chair, how does that change that's just been announced get reflected in the process today and the decision the committee will take?
From what I hear, it's merely a printing issue. The area, can we confirm the area is actually the same? No?
Looking to change the area at all?
Yeah, it has no impact, Mr. Chadwick, because it is of the same. It's just a rather bad print, unfortunately.
Unfortunately, yes, sorry.
I struggle to accept that. Surely the committee has to consider the application that's been made. The application contains contains a map which clearly extends the area very considerably. Is it not necessary to withdraw that map and supply a new one?
Well, we've had confirmation that it is in fact just the impression from the map, Mr. Chadwick. So I think we can be assured that the application site is exactly the same as is currently. I'll just ask for that confirmation again, Noel.
Yes, the map is, I can understand where Mr. Chadwick's coming from, but application, the length is the same. It's the width that looks like it's been extended, but that's not our intention. It will remain as it is.
You raise a good case in point, Mr. Chadwick, because it does look materially different, but we could give you our assurances that it isn't. Thank you for raising it.
Can I'm sorry to pursue the matter, but could I ask for an opinion from the legal representative who's here today as to whether the application is valid?
On your behalf, I will ask for our legal representative to comment. Ms. Coulter, could you comment, please?
Thank you, Chair. I think it's useful that it's been clarified, because I think the published plan for the proposal does seem to extend down to the tide line, or down for the whole beach. I think it's helpful that that has now been clarified. I don't think that that application was received and acknowledged and validated on the basis of the plan that was submitted. I think the applicant has very clearly set out now that that is not the case, that it is going to be exactly the same area as that covered by the current licence. On that basis, then you can proceed. In my view, it doesn't invalidate the application per se, but that does need to be clarified, and I'm pleased that has been clarified.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Coulter. It's extremely helpful, Mr. Chadwick. I hope that assists.
Can I ask a supplementary question, please?
Of course you may.
Yesterday, when we were considering two areas on the east side of the pier, the application for alcohol was restricted to only part of the licensed area. This time, we seem to be asking for being presented with a request for a license for the whole of the designated area, albeit that that's now rather smaller. Please, can Helen explain why the different approach is being taken this time?
Thank you, Mr. Chadwick. Helen, would you respond, please?
Yes, thank you. So the site that the size, it's a slightly smaller event site. So the size is the 25 by 15, which is why the whole area there is etched.
Would you repeat that, please, Helen, for clarity?
Yes. So the size that is etched because the licenses yesterday cover a wider groin area. So the etched area is the same size, but it just looks different because it's on the other ones are larger sites than this site.
Okay, so again, for clarity, this is appropriate. Helen?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Are you content, Mr. Chadwick? You may not be content, but do you feel you've had an answer to your question?
I suppose the answer is yes, but I'm afraid I do have another point to raise.
Of course, please do.
We are again today being presented with effectively two applications. One is for a restaurant, which it was made clear yesterday of less concern to residents, but also at the same time we have this blanket application to hold any number of events that the council events team choose throughout 365 days of the year. I do say most strongly that this is a wholly inappropriate way for the license application to be sought. This so-called flexibility simply isn't proper. And I would urge the committee to, if it's going to agree to anything beyond a restaurant, that the number should be limited. You've told us that there are to be 5 events in the year on the sites considered yesterday. But are we considering here 5 different days of the year? So of the 2 that have been granted already, does that actually make 10 days of events? And now, even if you agreed to 5 for this site, that would become 15. And no doubt there will be others we'll be considering later today. It seems to me we're getting out of hand here. It's not proper for the council to be seeking to ask for a license to be granted that is so unrestricted.
Okay, I don't know whether...
Just to be clear, in terms of licence applications, events cause a nuisance. There's just no doubt they will be heard over a very wide area.
Okay, I don't know whether that was a question or whether that was a statement, really, Mr. Chadwick, but it's certainly taken on board by committee. I don't know if you wish to respond, or you can respond to any of the statement.
I think just on the purpose of, I think it's very important to re-emphasise that process. It's not a case of somebody for an event. It's not. It's a very, very tight, restricted process that goes through a whole channels of authorisation. So I think it's and we decline many applications that come in as not being suitable. So it's not a case of us choosing choosing something. It's more about us making sure that an organiser is competent in order to organising an event is a huge responsibility, and we need. The purpose of our team is to make sure that those events that are being run safely on council land. So we have that interest of safety in mind, and so do all the responsible authorities and multi-agency partners that we work with.
You might want to remind us of the TENS rights and how that would impact.
Yes, so in terms of a temporary event notice, so if the licence isn't granted and somebody applies for that event, an event there or somewhere else, which isn't under a licence, they can apply for a temporary event notice, which is more of a notification. And the difference with the temporary event notice is you can't add restrictions onto it. So what we've offered up in conditions are then further mediated with environmental health and with Dorset Police. Are very stringent conditions that the licence that they have to have an event management plan. That wouldn't be on a temporary event notice. So it gives more, it gives us a lot more control to be able to manage and manage something on site as it happens rather than after an event.
Okay, and the amount of TENS applications that are allowed to be made?
I may refer this to Sarah Rogers to make sure that that information that I give is correct, but there is a certain amount of applications that can be made at one point.
It's a bit of a giveaway, but I just wanted clarification. Sarah, could you respond, please?
Yes, sorry, could you just repeat? Cut out a bit there.
The amount of TENS applications that...
Oh, yeah, so it's there's limits to the amount that can be made every calendar year, and the amount that a person can apply, and the amount of the hours. So off the top of my head, I think it's 12. Well, I'll have to double check, to be honest.
Okay,
but yes, there are limitations.
I'm happy to come back to you with that information.
Yep, we'll do.
I'm happy to come back to you. I wanted to discover that because I think it's important that the committee members understand exactly what the options are with regard to that.
Yeah, I have it here. So we have the number of times a premises user. So a person without a personal licence can apply 50 times in a calendar year. If you you can apply for a late 10 times a calendar year. For any particular premises, it's 15 times in a calendar year. One event, 110, cannot be any longer than 168 hours, which is 7 days. You can only have it for 21 days in a calendar year. And that's it.
Okay, so it's fairly wide sweeping. That's extremely useful to have that information.
And it's only limited to 499 people, obviously. So if there's any more people than that.
Yes, the limitations are smaller. Thank you very much indeed. That's extremely helpful, Sarah. Mr. Chadwick, do we have any further questions?
No, thank you.
Thank you very much for your questions. Always very incisive and covering a good expanse of information. George, Councillor Farquhar, did you want to come in to speak?
Yes, very much appreciated, Chair. I mean, just for clarification, because it's a very useful discussion we have here, and I really appreciate that we've clarified the area. Now, looking at the previous, and my question relates to a question which I asked yesterday. Looking at the existing license, you can see from the aerial shot and from the diagram from the floor plan is that it seems to indicate buildings, or should I say structures, which can be seen on both the diagram and the actual aerial photograph, which I presume are temporary structures such as a marquee or maybe some sort of shed or container vehicle or something like that. The question yesterday, and I'd like the same answer today from the applicant, is who is responsible for the construction of these temporary structures, and if that's different relating to the fact that the wedding organizer, to my understanding, is the applicant, and therefore it may well be provided by the council for those. But I'd like to know whether or not another applicant for an event would use those same structures, or they would put their own ones in, and what would happen to the existing wedding structures. I know it's not applicable this year because there aren't weddings, but what would happen with the existing structures?
Okay, Councillor Parker, George, I think what I'll do there is, you say, quite right to say it's not relevant, but it's a good question, and I'll ask the applicant to give you a response, but outside of this meeting, because it's not really appropriate for the meeting, but it's a good question. If it helps, I'll do that. Okay, thank you very much for the question. Mr. Warwick, did you want to come back with one more question? You're on mute.
It really arises out of questions put by Mr. Chadwick. Can I refer to paragraph 12.12 of the BCP Statement of Licensing Policy, where it's provided that the licensing authority would expect applicants to consider various matters in the context of promoting the 4 licensing objectives. And one of the matters, very low down on the list, is the potential cumulative impact of licensable activities in the relevant local area. And my question for Helen is whether the applicant council has really considered this point, because the committee will certainly have to.
Thank you. Just to let you know, a point of fact, a cumulative impact assessment policy, but we are always mindful with regard to this particular process. I'm sure that Helen will be able to extend on that, but we don't actually have a policy, but we do always bear it in mind, and obviously within the restrictions and issues which are placed against these applications, it is a very deep consideration. So Helen, could you further expand, please, just to assist, and then we'll move on. Thank you.
Yeah, I think on that, we've worked extremely hard with Dorset Police to ensure that what we are putting in and the conditions that have been proposed in respect of alcohol ensure that those licensing objectives are upheld, and ensure that we are promoting something that works for the area, that is about a responsible restaurant offering. It's so I think the conditions and the fact that we've had those in-depth dialogues with Dorset Police show how committed we are to upholding the licensing objectives.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Warwick. If Councillor Farquhar and Mr. Warwick, you'd pop your hands down. Andy, do you have a small supplementary before we move on? Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I was just after a little bit of clarification hearing about the TENS licenses.
Yeah.
Given that we are looking, or the applicant is looking at a number of sites along the beach here, it's a bit different to an individual premises where I can understand those limits. Would the council be able to say to anyone who applied for a TENS license anywhere else on the beach, no, you can't have one of those because you need to use our licensed areas, and therefore the additional constraints that we're requiring as a licensing authority apply? Or would they still be free to apply for TENS licenses anywhere else on the beach? Thank you.
Helen, could you respond, please?
Yes, in terms of they could still put an application in for an event using a temporary event notice. we would, and that would still go through that rigorous event management process, but there would not be, so yes, somebody could apply for a temporary event notice. It wouldn't, that would go through to the licensing department. So the licensing officers will be able to explain that process once that 10 goes in. But in terms of if they're doing a temporary event notice for the purpose of an event, they would still need permission from us to use the land.
Okay, thank you very much, Helen, for that explanation. There are no further hands. I think we've given good debate with regard to that issue. Nobody else is indicating. Thank you very much indeed. So thank you very much, Helen. Sorry that there were quite a few questions there, but extremely well responded, and you've been extremely helpful. And I'm sure you'll be on hand to assist in your summary. We now move on to responsible authorities, and I'd ask Sergeant Gareth Gosling if he'd like to put forward his submission. Thank you.
Good morning, Chair. As has already been highlighted by Helen this morning, in respect of this particular application, we have engaged in significant mediation around the conditions. I think that the 24 conditions that have been proposed by Dorset Police with agreement of Helen and her team, I think they make significant changes that help us to be satisfied that the risk of crime and disorder remains low, given the fact that we are now looking at restaurant style offerings. And I think really the purpose of me being here today is just to provide the committee with any further explanation or any context behind any of those 24 conditions that have been agreed, and to really reassure the committee that there will be ongoing monitoring of this site and the other sites should they all be granted, and that as part of our multi-agency operation this year, there will be an increased police presence along the beaches, both from Dorset Police and our partners as well. And also, I'd just like to make that final point that, of course, if there are any problems that do come from these premises, and we feel that there's more that can be done by the applicant to better promote the licensing objectives, then we will engage with them, and if we see it fit, progress the matter to review, as can any other individual or responsible authority. I've got nothing further to add.
Thank you very much, Sergeant Gosling. So questions now open to members in the first instance. Members, are there any questions for Sergeant Gosling as to the conditions applied? I'm not seeing any hands. Okay, thank you. They are fairly self-explanatory. So now our applicant, are there any questions of the applicant of our responsible authority?
No, thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. And on to our representatives. Any questions from our representatives with regard to Mr. Warwick? Thank you.
Yes, just one question. It was raised in relation to the sites considered yesterday. Sergeant Gosling, can you confirm that Dorset Police did not have sight of copies of the representations of objectors, including myself, before agreeing conditions?
Thank you, Mr. Warwick. Mr. Sergeant Gosling, thank you.
Yes, that's correct. Dorset Police consider a wealth of different intelligence and information available to us. And of course, one of the excellent things about the Licensing Act is that individuals, organisations, and indeed responsible authorities are free to representations in respect of applications, and we did so.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Wood. Could also point out that the application itself is in the public domain on the website, so any parties can cross-check what has been said. So it is open to the police if they so wish. And I know that Sergeant Gosling particularly is very, very prudent in his application and will always be looking with regard to any matter that he's involved with. So these your objections can be seen in the public domain by anybody, and that would include our responsible authorities. I hope that assists. Thank you, Mr. Warwick, for your question. If you just pop pop your hand down, thank you. Okay, so we have no further questions for our responsible authorities. So now we move on to our representatives, and we have just to indicate as to who with our representatives would like to speak. If you'd just like to indicate using the hand icon, thank you. Okay, I have Mr. Wilwick first. Mr. Wilwick, thank you.
All I wish to say, Madam, is that the matters that were taken into account yesterday in relation to the two other sites are the same matters that I would pray and aid in my submissions in relation to this site. That apart, I have nothing further to add.
Okay, and just for the purposes of the public, those matters which you, as you say, pray and aid and put forward were clearly outlined in the public domain in your objections. So everybody's had the opportunity to have sight of them. I'm grateful to you for your brevity. Thank you, Mr. Welwick. Mr. Chadwick, did you wish to add anything?
No, thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, now we have the opportunity for all parties will be given an opportunity to sum up. So we will begin with our representatives who spoke last. And if you would like to summarise, again, if you indicate if you wish to speak, you don't have to speak, but indicate if you so wish. Okay, I have no, oh, I do. I have Mr. Chadwick. Mr. Chadwick, thank you. Your summary.
I just wanted to repeat my concern about this application being used for events. I am deeply concerned that we should not make such a large series of areas on Bournemouth Beach available for use for events. Thank you.
Thank you. Just noting that down for events. I think the summary is probably the most important verbiage that we have. It encapsulates everything. Thank you very much, Mr. Chadwick. Sergeant Gosling, your summary, please.
I have nothing further to add, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And then on to our applicant. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So in summary, the site has been used previously for beach weddings, and that contract has expired and is not currently being retendered. We will review that after this year. So as a result, we're looking for a variation as discussed in the reasons in our in my opening information. We've had previous experience of running outdoor premise licenses without issue over a period of 15 years, and this site specifically since 2011. And as detailed, we have a very robust event management process. It uses industry standard in order to make sure that there is a multi-agency approach through what's called a safety advisory group to ensure that responsible authorities and other agencies have a chance to look and scrutinise individual plans in depth. It's a monthly ongoing process, so we review as we go on, and then there is an opportunity to raise anything that comes up in safety advisory groups afterwards. It's also important to note that we have a dedicated on-site seafront operations team who are equally very experienced to oversee the operations, and that has been significantly enhanced for this year. We believe that the conditions that we have worked on with Dorset Police really ensure that the licensing objectives are met in this variation application. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Helen. And Sarah, just to check as our presenting officer, do you have your summary, or are you happy? Are you content?
I have nothing further to add. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I will now conclude the hearing. The committee will adjourn in private. Whether we adjourn in private now or whether we leave it until we've heard the other two items is a matter for committee, and I will come to that at the end of my statement. We will or will not at this moment adjourn in private with the legal advisor and the clerk to deliberate. Notification of the committee's decision will be provided within the period of 5 working days, beginning with the day or the last day on which the hearing was held in accordance with the regulations under COVID rules. The notification of decision will include information about the right of appeal as appropriate, and I would just ask our legal advisor, Ms. Coulter, if she would kindly advise us as to the right of appeal.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, any person making a representation formally on this application and the applicant themselves can appeal against the decision depending on what it is today. The deadline is 21 days from receipt of the formal notice, so not from today, but from the formal notice, and that appeal has to be in writing to the Magistrates' Court, and information on the right of appeal will be included in that formal notification sent out to all those who have made representations. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chadwick, could I just ask if you'd pop your legacy hand down, please? Your hand is still showing. Thank you. I'm just going to check something on the Chair's chat with regard to the next meeting. Okay. So thank you very much, members, officers, ladies and gentlemen, with regard to all your contributions there. I'd just like to ask the committee, would the committee like to deliberate now, or would we perhaps, for expediting our business, deliberate at the end of the next 2 agenda items, so take 5 and then take 6 and then deliberate? I think I'll just have to ask for a clear show of hands, those who would wish to continue and deliberate at the end, or those who would deliberate after each item. So to continue and deliberate at the end, in favour, could I have a show of hands, please? Okay, that's looking as if everybody is content. Yes, I think that's more or less unanimous. So we will continue then, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much. And we will go on to our next application. And we have a gentleman who is waiting to join us, and I believe that is Mr. Reichwald. Good morning, Mr. Reichwald. You join us again. You're very welcome. Good to see you. So Mr. Reichwald is with us. Mr. Chadwick, are you to stay with us? You are, Mr. Woolwick, are you to stay with us? You're not indicated as somebody who's indicated to speak on this item, but you're more than welcome to stay with us. What's your...
No, thank you very much, madam. If I can say, I'm grateful for the courtesy that you've shown over the last 2 days. I will, in fact, now be leaving this meeting. Thank you very much indeed.
You're extremely kind. Thank you very much, Mr. Woolwick. So just to our 2 representatives who will be speaking today are Mr. Chadwick, and we welcome back Mr. Reichwald. Thank you very much. So we'll commence then. So item 5, application for variation of premises licence, Boscombe Promenade and Beach. This application is brought before the Licensing Committee for determination, just to check that everyone's received the supplementary additional evidence from the applicant. I'm not going to do all the informational introductions. Mr. Reichwald, just to advise, we are, as we were yesterday, we have a different presenting officer with regard to the application, and that is Helen Wildman. Mr. Weaver isn't with us today, but Helen will be able to cover everything. But apart from that, we are as the same. And our clerk is Michelle Cutler and not Miss Hooley. So those are the changes from yesterday. I hope that's associative. So we will...
Fine, thank you. Thank you.
For expediency, I don't think it's necessary to go through the whole of the introductions again. So I'll ask our licensing officer, if I may please, to present item 5. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you very much. This application is for the grant of a variation application for an area of the beach at Boscombe Promenade currently licensed to enhance the existing offering for the main season. As before, the application is made by Service Director for Destination and Culture on behalf of BCP Council, represented by BCP's Event Manager and Seafront Contracts Manager. The application is made to add the supply of alcohol sold between the hours of 10 AM and 11 PM from April to September, with the exception of the Air Festival and Night Air each year, where alcohol is requested from 10 to 11. It was agreed during the course of the consultation period that alcohol shall only be sold with food, and the off-sales provision is no longer sought. Conditions have been offered by the applicant in the operating schedule, which will be imposed onto the licence if granted. Dorset Police have agreed conditions at Appendix 4 with the applicant, and the representation has not been withdrawn at this time. In view of the conditions agreed with Dorset Police, Bournemouth Town Watch have confirmed the withdrawal of their representation. Therefore, committee members are requested to have regard to the representation made by Dorset Police and 7 other persons who are concerned that the application will not hold the licensing objectives. Should these conditions prove not to be successful, the applicant is aware that any of the responsible authorities or any other person may request a review of the licence at any times. I can also confirm that no representations were received from any of the other responsible authorities. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sarah. So we'll move on then for clarification of points of fact, and we will start with our members. Are there any clarification of points of fact from our members, if you'd like to indicate using the hand? Okay, I have nothing with regard to that. Move on to our applicant. Are there any clarifications, points of fact from our applicant? Helen?
Apologies, Chair. No, nothing from myself. Thank you.
Thank you. And Sergeant Gosling, do you have anything to add at this moment, or any points of fact to confirm?
Nothing from me, Chair. Thank you.
And our representatives. We have Mr. Reichwald, who's indicated he would like to clarify a point of fact. Thank you, Mr. Reichwald.
Madam Chair, can I just get clarification that this is purely for a restaurant facility and that the wide range of activities that we were discussing yesterday and were discussed on your earlier application this morning, that whole range is not what's being sought here? This is purely for a restaurant, or is it for the whole range of potential activities that the license was looked for? I'm not quite clear. I'd like some clarification, please.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Rice. If you'll indulge me, I think that's a question best put to our applicant, who'll be able to give you the minutiae of detail with regard to exactly what is entailed. So if you're happy to accept that, we'll defer that question when we have the opportunity for you to ask questions of the applicant. Are you content?
Yes, my apologies. Absolutely.
No, not at all, Mr. Reichwald. It's a good question, but I just want to ensure that you get it fully answered with regards to that. Okay, thank you very much. So if there are no further questions then for our licensing officer, presenting officer, we'll move on and ask our applicant Helen Wildman on behalf of BCP to make her application. Thank you, Helen.
Thank you, Chair. So this application before us is for a variation. It is to an existing premise licence that currently exists. The only change that we are looking for today is to that on the supply of alcohol. Alcohol is currently permitted on our existing premise licence for the Air Festival only for a purpose of 2 days. And that, as Sarah mentioned, is from 10 till 11. We are looking to vary to include the supply of alcohol through the season of April to September from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. Within that same alcohol area. The purpose for applies is for the restaurant facilities that we have previously talked about. And it's about having the responsible hospitality. We would like to keep that alcohol provision for the Air Festival on there. Again, we're promoting a modern resort that's safe and responsible, and we've worked very closely with Dorset Police on the alcohol provision to ensure that the licensing objectives are upheld. There's a copy of the tender specification in your packs. Just to clarify, we haven't currently gone out in our current offering of tenders for this site. It is we're waiting for that first look on tenders to then make that decision. But anything that did go out would that specification would be used with any tweaks, but it gives you an overview. In terms of the variation, again, with this this premise license we've had for many years, I believe it's about 15. We have varied it probably about 6 years ago, where we added in the alcohol for the Air Festival, and we have shown and demonstrated that we haven't had that called in for any review. And we also have experience of all of our other sites. And experience of what we put in there and making sure that we go through the right process for it. In terms of the process that we go through, in the process for a restaurant provision or for that supply of alcohol is the same process for events. So there is no difference that we go through a full safety advisory group. In order to ensure that everything in the plans are correct and cover the licensing objectives and also the wider event scope of logistics and making sure that that safety element is met. And we have a safety advisory group where all of those plans are presented. Again, we have a very experienced seafront operations team that are on site this summer. And when we do have any large events on in that site, we do have an on-call process. The conditions we've worked on with Dorset Police remain the same as the other sites that we've discussed and are very in-depth. In terms of mediating with environmental health, we discussed all of the applications. This specific one, because of what we've held on the site previously in terms of the night air, has a more in-depth noise management section. So it's actually more enhanced than the others. So we don't plan to take any of that away. That would all remain. Representations, we've sent out information on our intention and answered questions as much as we can. Again, making sure that we clarify that process that's in place. That's everything. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Helen. Thank you. So we now move on to questions of our applicant. Members, your questions, please, if you'd like to indicate and raise your hand. Okay, Councillor Farquhar, thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. I think I just beat Councillor Hadley there, and I suspect it's probably a similar question. Obviously, on the two drawings, they are an identical copy. My concern relates to the span of the alcohol, the alcohol license permitted area. In yesterday's discussions, we clarified that the licensed area for alcohol was much constrained simply because it was for the purposes of the pop-up eating facility where you could eat. You could only be supplied and drink alcohol in an area where you're seated. I'm not seeing that on the plan, and I'm not seeing that in the application pack. So my question of the applicant is, how are we as a committee going to consider what area is going to be affected by the alcohol license, please?
Thank you, Councillor Farquhar. I think to clarify the licensable area where drinks can be purchased and consumed. Thank you, Helen.
The current alcohol serving area is in line with what was existing there for the supply of alcohol in terms of the Air Festival. Our intention is to have, in terms of the restaurant offering, is to have that smaller area as we previously discussed. In terms of how we obviously we would be happy to condition that wider area is in terms of the existing supply of alcohol for the Air Festival, which is already we already have, in order to confirm that it would be the certain area as we've discussed in the other site. So that may clarify it, but I think the supply of alcohol, there's two different sizes depending whether it was to do with the Air Festival or whether it's to do with anything else. So that's the reason why it's there, but we would have no issue in stipulating that maybe within the conditions.
Okay, Councillor Farquhar, does that assist?
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your question, Councillor Farquhar. You just pop your hand down. Thank you. Councillor Hadley?
Thank you. Yes, my question wasn't quite the same, actually, but I suppose it is interesting in terms of it would have been really helpful on the plan to have shown those two areas. I've got two questions. One is about the cumulative impact. So there's already a pub and a cafe in that area. And so particularly in times of COVID, the purpose of these additional sites was to spread the load along the beach and perhaps to give people a bit more space. So we do seem to be creating something of a pinch point. And as I say, we talked about cumulative impact without having a policy, but with having regard to it. So it feels to me that this is an area where it's already quite busy with catering offerings, and we're adding a third. The other one was the licensed area, and I appreciate that's not what you're applying for, but it seems the licensing area on these maps includes the area we considered yesterday, the Toft Steps area. So the council was already licensed for the area that you applied for yesterday, and we debated at great length, which seems a bit odd. But can I ask for clarification on how these two licenses will interact? Thank you.
Yes, I'll just ask our legal advisor, Ms. Coulter, if she'd like to comment on two licenses acting upon the same area. Thank you, Ms. Coulter.
Thank you. It is for the applicant to consider which licence they wish to rely on when undertaking licensable activities. So it is possible, maybe not usual, but possible for a premises to have two licenses coexisting. I'm not sure that was the intention here, but that is possible to do it legally. So I think in this case, if the applicant wishes to rely on the licenses as granted subject to the conditions yesterday, then that is what they will publish, and that is what they will rely on for those areas that were licensed yesterday. For the remainder of the current licensable area for this license, which is the variation application relates to, then the remainder of that area will continue as it is currently to be licensed by that premises license. The applicant may or may not wish to submit an application to vary this license to align the areas, and that might make it slightly easier to manage from a logistical point of view, and that's for them to consider as the applicant. So I think in regard to the application before you today, the consideration is in relation to, I think, the application for the alcohol area that's been submitted, and that's the application for the variation to this license today. But you are correct that it does extend over the areas that were considered yesterday.
Thank you very much, Ms. Coulter. That's extremely helpful. So there can be two coexisting, and I think this committee would be encouraging the applicant to consider that variation. A quite strong recommendation, I think, sits there. Thank you, Andy. And the other question was regard to the cumulative impact effect and how what weight you give to that, Helen, when you're considering the applications that come before you for events and for use of the area, not events, but use of the area. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. In response to that, I think that's where we're at with the current tendering process that we're in at the moment. Is we've although we've obviously applied for the sites because it's a detailed process, we are looking at those first sites that are in the tender specification that you will see as part of your documents, and then from there we will assess rather than going in with everything when, as you quite rightly said, Councillor Hadley, there are other existing facilities in place. So at the moment it's a case of more of a staged approach, and part of that is to have a look at those initial proposals, see if for those initial areas, and then look to if we feel that demand is there and we need to meet it, and by meeting it through the restaurant facilities with the increase in staycations that we are all aware are likely for this season, then that's in place for us to do. So we take very seriously the other areas and where we're putting anything. So I think that's why we've done it in a two-staged approach. So hopefully that clarifies that for you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Councillor Hadley. No other members have a question. I so much a question as an observation with regard to, you used the word add with regard to hours, and in fact that's not helpful because you are indeed amending them because at one stage at the beginning of the day you're increasing, and at the end of the day you're curtailing with regard to activity. So I believe that for advice it might be better to use the word add, because you're actually adding. Where they may sit is immaterial, but to say the word amend rather than add, because you're amending the hours. Adding suggests you're making more, but actually it's less overall. It's just a point.
Thank you, noted.
If that's helpful, thank you. Thank you very much. So now we move on to, thank you for those questions, members. We now move on to our responsible authorities. Sergeant Gosling, do you have any questions?
No, I have no questions.
Thank you very much. And now we move to our representatives. Our representatives have any questions for our applicant? If you'd like to, thank you, indicate. Okay, I'll just scroll down. Mr. Reichwald, thank you.
I did. Can I now repeat the question, which you said really should go to the applicant?
I think that would be very appropriate.
I just want to be clear that this is purely for a restaurant facility and does not include that breadth of range of activities from plays, shows to circuses being in this area. So this is just a restaurant facility. That's my first question.
So the variation before us today is exactly that. It's that supply of alcohol in licensing terms that we are looking to vary. There is already a premise license in place. So what we were discussing about having that is an existing license that exists, and what we're looking to do today is create that variation to enable us to do the restaurant. So it's just that supply of alcohol that's being discussed. Does that clarify for you?
It does, but it does clarify, if I'm correct, Madam Chair, that actually this site has already got the facilities that we were added on yesterday for the other areas. So we could see plays and concerts and things going on that area of the beach just as much. That's already a fact that's there, isn't it?
Yes, that's the case, Mr. Reichwald. There are licenses already in place. The licensable activities are already in place. Yeah.
Fine. Well, that will add to our concerns. My last direct question, Madam Chair, is Helen, you talked about large events and noise monitoring as you've got the increased noise monitoring. Constitutes a large event?
Thank you, Helen. If you'd like to respond.
Yeah, so the reason for that historically on the license is when we hosted the night air concerts as part of the Air Festival. So that was when we were putting that together, we needed to vary the license to be able to allow for that, and as a result, the environmental health, we liaised in great detail and put some very in-depth noise management in there. So that is what that specifically relates to. On the other side, what constitutes a large event, we basically have the difference in the events industry between a minor event and a major event. A minor event is generally a fairly small event, generally doesn't have a lot of licensable activities, but may have some. A large event, as my colleague mentioned yesterday, is generally around the 700 to 1,000, anything upwards. But that is dependent on what's being offered. So if an event and the audience profile, so we would look at the application and then determine through all of these different kind of checkpoints whether that became what we class as a large or major event. I don't know whether my colleague from Environmental Health would be able to explain anything more about the noise if you wanted him to.
I'm quite happy, Chair, with the answer that I have been given. And I will include in my concern, unless the environment can help us, actually the noise comes from relatively few people. Last night we had people normally coming off the beach, but it was over midnight. There were 8 or 9 of them, clearly having imbibed, and that's absolutely fine. But what I'm trying to say is a small number in a narrow area can cause noise rising up to give disturbance to residents. And I will want to make sure that the number that we can call when there is trouble, it will be live, even if it is for small numbers attending events. This happens with mass exits, not from a pub, which is much larger, but when a restaurant closes and 8 or 9 tables empty, give or take at the same time. This is an impact that I'm asking the committee to concern. In asking you the question, have you got concerns of that nature?
Thank you, Helen. If you'd like to respond.
Yeah, so in terms of the what we put there, we through our event process, we make sure that we're putting, or the supplier is put, or event organizer is putting conditions in place and putting as part of their experience and as part of their tender process, as part of their plans, that they are putting in places to mitigate that. To obviously, that is dealing with what they're serving, so that restaurant offer, it won't account for anything else that's along the seafront, but it will account for that restaurant offer. And I think there's measures that go in place. So for an example, they will all have security. So there is actually, it's not about putting something additional in without any measures to deal with that. And that's the purpose of the plans that we go through. So there will be security to make sure that happens. We've got a very detailed seafront plan for this season, as well with enhancement and the seafront operations team and Noel in terms of contract management, make sure that those are met, and if they're not, then that is a breach of the contract. So there are additions that go in place with that. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Reichwald, for your questions. Mr. Chadwick, did you wish to ask some questions of our applicant? Thank you.
Yes, please. Could you tell me the dimensions of the alcohol area?
Thank you, Helen, if you'd like to respond.
Apologies, sorry, I was just checking it. So the alcohol area for this site is 40 by 20 metres.
Right. So that is a much larger area than we've just been discussing at the wedding area. Also, we've discussed the nuisance that a restaurant can cause by means of noise, odours, deliveries in the very early in the morning, rubbish removal very early in the morning, and so on. And the point has been made about noise right at the cliff top. But the western end of this alcohol area is in front of that relatively new block of flats at sea level, underneath what I think is called Honeycomb Beach, where the potential for noise disturbance is very much greater. So I would ask that consideration is given by the committee not to granting this licence for alcohol throughout the whole of the alcohol area, but only in the eastern end, let's say the 20 metres width starting at the eastern boundary instead of 40 metres width.
Okay, I'd like some clarification there, Helen, as to the current licence for the licensable area. I think that needs clarity. Thank you.
Sorry, just to clarify on that. So the existing, because we're on a variation, the existing licence area for alcohol was in relation to the night air concerts. It is a larger area than the other sites in terms of dimensions, in order to cover both of those off.
Okay. Has that assisted you, Mr. Chadwick?
Well, it's explained the fact, but I'm saying that it is not proper in terms of noise and odour disturbance to have a restaurant with at 6 a.m. outside a block of flats, and therefore there should be a restriction on the area.
Okay, so your concern, just to drill down, Mr. Chadwick, is specific to the removal of waste, refuse, etc., with regard to the activities which are occurring. So that's something which the committee can consider with regard to conditioning.
No, it does include that, but it also includes the activity of the restaurant itself from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. I just wanted to make the point that, in fact, the disturbance will start at, according to these papers, 6 a.m. or soon after. So we're really talking about the residents of those flats being disturbed for a very long part of every day of the week.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chadwick. Thank you for that clarity. I'm now, Mr. Chadwick and Mr. Reichwald, you've spoken. So I just ask our presenting officer if you have any comments, questions. Sarah?
No, I'm fine, thank you. Nothing further to add.
Thank you very much. So all our presentations made and all questions asked, I'll just check. I might scroll. No, nobody indicating. Thank you very much for those questions and for the responses. So we now have all parties have the opportunity to sum up, and the party who spoke last can go first. So that's indeed you, Mr. Chadwick, in your summary. Thank you.
Yeah, I would only repeat what I've impact on noise in that block of flats, which, just for the record, is not where I live.
Okay, you're very kind to speak on somebody else's behalf, Mr. Chadwick. Thank you so much. Mr. Reichwald. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I think I'm just raising certain areas here. It is this 365 days a year, but you're now coming to 5 events in that, so let's drop that. I am concerned now that on this license that there are already 2 eateries licensed right at that point, and you're now going to add a third. Is a third really necessary would be part of my question. I understand what the council is wanting to do and its variety, but the pinch point of people going there is the same as for the 2. And the additional parking, and I'm talking here, Madam Chair, not because I'm talking about parking, I'm talking of the nuisance that it causes, hence the validation for consideration by this committee, is going to push extra parking around Monkey Island and the section of the road that goes around Dorchester Mansions and Green Park and affects us on the East Cliff. And really concerned about people leaving there, being noisy and causing the disturbance to residents in this area. So that third unit is going to add to that particular issue. And I think that needs to be concerned. And with that parking comes the safety for people, particularly with visual impairments and disabilities, when the cars park on the verge and on the walking pavement area, that then can't be closed. And this is a serious issue. And if the license is granted, then perhaps you can put a condition on that attention is given to the control of inappropriate parking on that site, because there are yellow lines and everything else. Those are my real concerns, as this affects the wider area. And as I said to you yesterday, my voice comes with a strong voice of not just the 137 Albany, but on behalf of the network of chairs, which actually represents over 800 blocks, and actually all the blocks in this particular area are part of this network. And I think the strong voice and the fact that I'm not sure all the impact of this was truly realised or contemplated by the applicant at the time. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to make this summary.
Thank you again, Mr. Reichwald. Thank you very much. Moving then to our responsible authorities. Yes, let me see. Yes, responsible authorities. Sergeant Gosling, would you like to summarise, please? And it would be grateful if you would. Thank you.
I have nothing further to add, more than what's already been said. Thank you.
And that's with regard to the reasoning behind your conditions and your confidence in those applied with regard to this application.
Yes, absolutely. We feel that the 24 conditions that we've agreed with the applicant will give us that confidence that the levels of crime and disorder, the risk of crime and disorder, will be kept very low, and it will be continued to be monitored by my team, other members of the neighbourhood policing team, and our partners also, to make sure that there's compliance across the board.
Thank you very much indeed. That's extremely helpful. And to our applicants, please, your summary. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So in summary, we are looking to vary the licence for the supply of alcohol in line with the presentation that we've given. We have a lot of previous experience on this site and on other outdoor premise licence sites that we hold, and we have also had experience of alcohol on this site as well. We have a very experienced event management team and seafront team, and the seafront operations team are dedicated on site to oversee the operations. We have, as mentioned, a very vigorous event management process, and within that, part of that process is traffic management. So I know it's not part of the licensing per se, maybe, but that does cover off anything that we use any of the sites for. They do have to cover off traffic management with the highways department. And we have that multi-agency approach through safety advisory group processes in order to make sure that the site is well managed and that the conditions within the licence are met by us. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Councillor Farquhar, I have a very late hand. What is the matter?
Thank you, Chair. I just, if it's possible, with Sergeant Gosling's representation, if there may be advantageous to the committee to talk about one of his conditions and the effect that it may or may not have on the pinch points caused by eating establishments which are already in the area on the seafront.
Before you continue, Councillor Farquhar, I have to admonish you because you have had the opportunity to raise this when the responsible authority did put their submission. But in the interest of the committee, in the interest of further advising us, I will allow this question. But please could you be mindful and bring your questions in at the appropriate time. Thank you very much, Councillor Farquhar. If you could be brief as well. Thank you.
Absolutely, Chair. It relates to point 23 on page 135, and you were kind enough to read out that condition, and it related to advertisements, etc. I just wanted to bring a little bit of knowledge to the committee because I've used the establishments in that particular area there. The area which is going to be covered by the licensing area actually narrows where the flats are marked on the map there. So it narrows, the promenade itself narrows as you go towards the east. My point, or my local knowledge, which I wanted Sergeant Gosling's view on pinch points, is that when those two eating establishments that are there, particularly under COVID, you seek another place. So if you're told, oh, no reservations, or we can't take you, so forth, you seek another place. The other establishments have signage out so that you then, as a member of the public, can naturally move to that next location. If the licensed area for the pop-up restaurant, which we're saying here, moves to the east, then that wouldn't naturally fall into to the eastern end of the area in question here, wouldn't naturally fall into the public's knowledge that that establishment was there. So I just wanted to have a view on the flow of the public when they're using establishments for eating and drinking, if that's possible, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Farquhar. I will ask if Sergeant Gosling is content to respond to your question, although it perhaps more of a statement than a question, but you did give reference to point 23. So for the committee, and this is publicly recorded and going live, I will just read point 23, which is the condition, Sergeant Gosling, which may assist. I'm sure you can't remember which one it is, so I'll read it for you. No advertisements of any kind, including placard, poster, sticker, flyer, picture, letter, sign or other mark that advertises or promotes the establishment, its premises or any of its events, facilities, goods or service shall be inscribed or affixed upon the surface of the highway or upon any building, structure, work, street furniture, tree, or any other property, or be distributed to. I hope that assists. Thank you, Sergeant Gosling, if you can help us. Thank you.
Thank you. So as we did discuss briefly yesterday, this is a condition that's infrequently used. However, the main purpose, I would say, is rather not to affect the flow of the public, but rather more to the purpose of it really is to discourage that ready advertisement of alcohol availability, if you like, and that really is the purpose, rather than to have an effect on the flow of the public. So it is a condition that's been proposed by ourselves and the applicant. However, if of course the committee decide that they would like to remove that condition, then they are of course free to do so. However, we feel that by reducing that opportunity to advertise, in particular alcohol availability, we feel that that will go some way towards helping the applicant to promote the licensing objectives, perhaps more in line with the objective of prevention of children from harm. So it's all around making sure that alcohol provision is secondary to food.
Thank you, Sergeant Gosling, for that assurance. It is assistative, George, rather than to not assist. I hope that assists. Councillor Dove, again, you've indicated very late. I will admonish you as well. Please can all members speak for management of the meeting, for the purposes of the general public and for matters to go smoothly. Questions should really be asked at the appropriate time. But as it's always important to allow members, if there's a late point, Councillor Dove, I will allow your point. Who's it for, Councillor Dove? Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry, Chair. I didn't realise my hand was up.
Oh, bless your heart. Then I remove my admonishment. Thank you so much. I'm so sorry that you put your hand up. I should have checked that first. My apologies, Councillor Dove. Thank you very much, Sergeant Gosling, for addressing that late point. With those matters covered, I will now conclude the hearing. And the committee will adjourn in private at the end of the next item with the legal advisor and clerk to deliberate. Notification of the committee's decision will be provided in the period of 5 working days, beginning with the day or the last day of which the hearing was held, which is today, in accordance with the regulations. The notification decision will include information about the right of appeal as appropriate, and I will ask Ms Coulter if she would please advise us with regard to the right of appeal. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just to confirm that anyone making a representation or any interested party can appeal against the decision of the committee today. Must do so within 21 days of receiving notification of that decision to the Magistrates' Court in writing, and that detail will be included in the notification sent out, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you very much, members and officers and representatives with regard to that item. We'll now move on to item 6, agenda item 6. And just before we move on, Mr. Reichwald, you've not indicated that you wish to speak at this. Thank you very much for all your contributions.
Fine. Madam Chair, can I just thank you for the chairing and the ability for our representations to be clearly made and heard by the committee, clearly with some success, and we're really very grateful for the opportunity. And may I personally say that the way you chaired this and gave us that opportunity was really appreciated. Thank you.
You're extremely kind, Mr. Reichwald. Thank you very much. You're very welcome to leave us now in the meeting and to return on YouTube to listen. Thank you very much, Mr. Reichwald. So our representative for this particular item is Mr. Chadwick. So, Mr. Chadwick, you're staying with us. Thank you very much. So this is item 6. This is an application for variation of premises licence, Bournemouth Pier Approach. And the application is brought for the Licensing Committee for determination. Check that everyone has received the supplementary additional evidence from our applicant. That said, we will move straight to the licensing officer, and I will ask Sarah, please, if she would present the report. Thank you, Sarah.
Many thanks. As said, this is an application for variation to a currently licensed area to enable it to be used for events. To add the supply of alcohol. So the application is made for alcohol to be sold between the hours of 10 AM and 11 PM from April to September, with the exception of the Air Festival each year, where alcohol is currently permitted from 12 PM to 11 PM for 12 days to coincide with that event. It was agreed during the course of the consultation that alcohol shall only be sold with food, therefore the off-sales provision again is no longer sought. Conditions have been offered by the applicant, which will be imposed onto the licence if granted, with the addition of further conditions which have been agreed following mediation with Environmental Health, which are set out at Appendix 4. Dorset Police have also agreed conditions at Appendix 5, but their representation is not withdrawn at this time. In view of the conditions agreed with Dorset Police, Bournemouth Town Watch confirmed that they have withdrawn their representation. Therefore, members are requested to have regard to the representation made by Dorset Police and one other person who are concerned that the application will not uphold any of the licensing objectives. And as always, these conditions prove not to be successful. The applicant will be aware that any of the responsible authorities or any other person may request a review of the licence at any time. No representations were received from any of the other responsible authorities. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sarah. So members, your opportunity now with points of fact to raise a question for Sarah. Members, are there any questions with regard to confirmation for points of fact? If you'd like to indicate. Okay, I can't see anybody. Thank you. Helen Wildman, do you have any confirmation for points of fact as our applicant?
Just to clarify, for the restaurant supply of alcohol that we've asked for is from 10 till 100 hours, with the exception of the Air Festival that's currently there from 10 till 2300 hours.
Thank you very much. That's useful. I'm just popping that in. Thank you. Okay, so moving on, responsible authority, Sergeant Gosling, do you wish to raise any points of confirmation of fact?
No points of fact from me, Chair. Thank you.
Very much. And our representative, Mr. Chadwick, if you'd like to put your question, thank you.
Yes. The applicant has a duty to advertise this request for a variation. They have not done so lawfully. Would you like me to justify that statement now or wait until the applicant is making their comments?
No, I think what I'll do is I will ask our legal advisor, Ms. Coulter, if she would like to comment and advise the committee as to that point. Thank you, Ms. Coulter, if you're able to do that.
Thank you, Chair. I think I'd like to understand what aspect of legality Mr. Chadwick is talking about before providing comment. Does it relate to the notices or is it otherwise?
Indeed. Thank you, Mr. Coulter. Could you be more specific in relation to what specific part of the advertisement?
Yes, the legislation, the 2003 Act, requires the applicant to advertise in accordance with the prescribed form, and the prescribed form is set out in the Licensing Act regulations of 2005, and that includes the statement that where there's no postal address for the premises, a description of those premises sufficient to enable the location and extent, my emphasis of extent, of the premises is to be identified. In this particular case, the notice refers to peer approach, and so does the information in the licensing register. There is no plan attached to the information in the licensing register, nor is any plan attached to any document until we get the pack that was seen by me just the other day, which has page 151, which shows that in fact a substantial area of beach is involved, and it is indeed the area of beach for which this variation is sought. I had assumed, and I suggest that the only valid interpretation of the notices is that the pier approach is the land that extends southward from the end of the lower gardens to the start of the pier, and includes the area where there is a cafe close to where the IMAX used to be. And I thought that this was an application to serve alcohol in that cafe. I now see that it is not, and I don't believe that that is a valid fault by me. It's a fault in the advertising.
Okay, I hope that's assistive, Ms. Coulter. Are you able to give the committee some support now, some advice?
Thank you. Thank you. It does assist in clarifying the query.
Okay.
So the application is for a variation of an existing licence, and within that existing licence, it is defined as peer approach. So it's an application to vary a licence that already has the description of peer approach within it, although it includes an area of the beach as well. That's the definition of the peer approach, is that wider area. Within the application itself, there is a plan attached to that. That's what I can see, and that's attached as an appendix to the papers before you. But the application itself should be available on the register, and the website address and the address given pursuant to the regulations on the advert then will direct members of the public then to that department and to the council to then ascertain the full detail as to what is applied for, which is contained then in the sort of fairly lengthy application form, which is prescribed, and then the plan is attached, and that plan does have the area highlighted. So the notice itself complies with the regulations, although I accept, you know, unless you look at the actual plan attached to the application, you are not going to know the full extent of the premises, and that will be the case for many applications. It will have a postal address, but the extent of that premises and that address will not be apparent until you actually look at the application form and the detailed plan that would go with that. That's the position.
Thank you, Ms Coulter. And just to be quite precise, that position is acceptable. So at source, as one is looking at the lamppost with the piece of paper on it, you may or may not be aware of exactly what it pertains to until such time as you've referenced the images given on that document, which is compliant with the requirements under the Act. Ms Coulter?
If that's a question, then the answer is yes. The regulations prescribe what should go into. Yes, the regulations prescribe what should go into that notice, and that notice, you know, states the address and an identifier as to the location. So the peer approach. Now, different people may have a different definition of peer approach, the same as another defined area. Someone else might have a different definition of what that means. That is the address and the location, and then the address of the licensing authority and the website is put onto that notice along with the licensable activities, directing then the public to the relevant authority where they can find out further information. And in most cases, one would have to look at the application and the plan to ascertain the full extent of what is proposed and what area the premises cover. And that is not the case here. That would be the case generally, because there's no requirement to put a plan alongside that notice and be more specific within the regulations.
Thank you very much. That is a very clear explanation. And certainly, one moment, Mr. Chadwick, certainly expands on my paraphrasing. Did you have another question for the licensing officer, Mr. Chadwick?
Am I allowed to comment on the legal view we've been given?
I don't really think it's assistive at this point in time. It may be that you'd like to raise that when the applicant puts forward their submission. Mr. Chadwick, is that acceptable?
Well, it's a statement of what's going to happen, isn't it?
To make that statement when the applicant has put forward their submission, I'm sure it's more relevant there because it's apropos to the actual application. So if we're all content, thank you. Moving on, I'll ask our applicant, Helen Wildman, if you would kindly please put forward your submission. Thank you, Helen.
Thank you, Chair. So this application is for a variation to our existing premise licence that is held on that site, on this site, and has been held for over 15 years. The change that we are before you today for is a change to the supply of alcohol. Currently, it is only permitted for the Air Festival and a period of time either side, and we are looking to change that today. As we've previously heard today, the purpose for this is to have a pop-up restaurant facility for the summer season. This actually, for this site specifically, we have actually operated a restaurant facility on this site as part of that Air Festival successfully for 2 years without any issues from that site. It again is about offering that responsible hospitality and that positive vibe into the resort and into that openings part of the resort. The tender specification is within your evidence packs so that you can see what we will be going out for. And alongside that, although it's a variation and we're varying that specific element, we do still go through a full event process. So what I discussed previously in the hearing with regards to the requirement for an event management plan and having a safety advisory group process with multi-agencies to cover off not just the licensing aspect but all aspects of event management. it will be held as we have put in within the application. We have got over 23 premise licenses of outdoor open space across BCP, which we have held for many years, and again that's in the evidence pack, and are very used to the different styles and types of events that come through, and make sure that all of our team have undergone training specifically with regards to licensing to ensure that they are aware of the complexities of it as well. We've mediated with the police on the same conditions as agreed throughout all of these applications. We worked very hard with them to ensure that what we're putting in is going to enhance the seafront and not cause any issues with it in terms of the alcohol management. We have also worked with environmental health officers and agreed terms conditions, in terms of noise management as well for it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. I'm hoping that some of the technical issues in the background have resolved. Ms. Coulter, are you now satisfied? Your technical issues are resolved? Ms. Coulter?
Sorry, Chair. It wasn't me. It was Michelle Cutler, I think, that had the issues. The clerk.
I'm
hoping that she is back in. I think I can see her, but she'll.
Yes, I'm back.
It.
Okay, you're back.
I can confirm I'm back in. Apologies.
Notification that we couldn't continue without our clerk. So was there was nothing that you missed there specifically, Michelle?
No, I literally drove out for about 30 seconds, Chair. Thank you.
Okay. That's fine. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much, Helen, for your presentation. So we now look to open the floor to members with regard to their questions. Members first. So members, if you have questions, please raise them now. And we have Councillor Hadley and then Councillor Farquhar. Thank you, Councillor Hadley.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, this is the busiest area of the beach. It's the prime site in terms of the Bournemouth beaches, and extremely busy. And I'm actually quite concerned about this area being blocked off for a restaurant rather than available as part of the core of the beach, both visually and in terms of access. And I suppose it comes back to that congestion issue again, because again you've got a restaurant behind, there's a restaurant in the bay, and is this the appropriate location? But can you also advise, please? We've got two areas marked within the line, both on the same side of the pier, and they're separated by the aerial runway landing point and the lifeguards. So is it one restaurant that you're looking to run here, and would it be running both sides of that, and how would that work in terms of logistically and sensibly, given the we don't want to interfere particularly with the lifeguard? I'm not so worried about the area.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your question, Andy. Well made. Helen, could you comment, please?
Yeah, so if I comment firstly on the two areas, and then I'm going to hand to the contracts manager for the seafront on terms of the provision. So the alcohol serving area is one or the other. So sometimes it's just depending on tide or beach layout. So for clarity for what we're looking at for this summer, it's the one closest to Bournemouth Pier, but we wouldn't have the two together. They're not two sites that are used. It's again that kind of multi-use site. So hopefully that clarifies that point for you, Councillor. And Noel will just talk you through the contracts part of choosing that location.
Thank you, Noel.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I mean, the councillor is right. It's a very highly populated area, and that is one of the reasons why we are looking to introduce ancillary catering. Various points over the last couple of years, we basically have saturation in our restaurants, and people are queuing for 1-2 hours for a portion of chips, etc. So we believe that an additional facility would benefit the public. I don't know if that answers the questions. Sorry.
Well, it does to some extent as to provision, yes, but there was also the question with regard to appropriate location because of the use of the beach by the public per se.
Okay, yeah. So Helen mentioned that we've had a facility there for the past couple of years during August. I think last year there was a 10-day period where it was actually in that location and hasn't caused us any issues at all in terms of congestion or the public not being able to access areas of the beach.
Well, that's assuring. Okay, and that was for the period of time for the Air Festival.
Yes, it was pre-Air Festival and the Air Festival itself. Yes.
Sorry, what's pre-Air Festival?
It was a 10-day period, so we had 6 days prior to the Air Festival.
Oh, so 10-day period in all. Okay, thank you very much indeed. Thank you, Councillor Hadley. Councillor Farquhar.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry for the delay there.
No worries.
Yes, no, a fairly similar question to Councillor Hadley's, and I'd just like to expand a little bit more. I'm referring to the plan on 151, page 151 in the application, and page 161, which is the existing licensed area. My first question essentially is, I take it that the zip wire or the aerial runway we referred to wasn't in operation or isn't in operation during the Air Festival. And do we have a public safety question mark? Because that aerial runway will be in operation in the area which you're referring to. I'm unhappy as a committee member to say, well, it's one or the other, because I appreciate that we've used or had a structure there or had an alcohol license there for the previous 2 years, depending on a tide. So which is it that which is it specifically that we're considering? The third part is that not necessarily it is a great attraction point for families, that particular area, but I refer back to the influx of visitors which we had during the summer. It's very, very dense in there. And I know I was on the beach helping out myself, just how dense the population is. My concern relates to the size of the license area and the size of the temporary restaurant area, because it doesn't, to my mind, lend itself to the amount of litter and rubbish and cleanup facilities, the staff which do that on a daily basis, to actually manoeuvre around a temporary structure, whether it be a marquee or a pop-up restaurant or whatever. So I'd like some clarification as regards the precise dimensions of the establishment, the precise location of the establishment, which will be, and whether or not we have whether or not it will interfere with the aerial runway, which I'm pretty much sure didn't operate during the Air Festival when it was there before. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Parker. 3 questions there. Precise dimensions, location, and whether any structure would interfere with the aerial runway. Thank you. Helen. Or Noel, I'm not concerned as to who, but somebody to answer, please.
Okay, thank you. So I'll take the zip wire one first, if I may. So it does actually operate during the Air Festival, but it's outside of flying times. So the zip wire doesn't operate when the air display is happening, but other than that, it does. The site location, and you may not be able to see it on the aerial, is just actually outside of the zip wire, so that the two don't conflict, and they can run together and have done successfully. So there is that space to do that. In terms of the seafront existing operation, so we work for any events and also with this, and when we've used this site for the Air Festival. And that's one thing with this application, is we have tried and tested this site, and we work with people such as our tractors team on the seafront team to have that site visit and make sure that they still have access, and if anything needs to be changed. So in terms of their site layout, to make sure that the existing seafront operations aren't hindered. In terms of inside the site, that is the operator's responsibility to ensure, as part of that process, that that remains clean and tidy, and that area is managed for that site. I think the third question was around the dimensions. So this, I'm going to say it's 35 by 25 metres, but it's not 100% square. So there are so that is if it was square, but you can actually take a little bit of a corner off that. If you have a look at the site map, it goes in slightly, but I can give you the square meterage if that would help.
Okay, well, short of us all getting our square rules out and adopting Pythagoras, I think that might be helpful.
If I may, Chair, my question relates to the size of the structure rather than the size of the licensable area.
Okay. I don't
so
think
that sorry, did not clarify that. And the other one, the other part of the question was, which of these two locations would that structure be built?
Okay, I think you've had the answer on that one. There's some flexibility. It could be either. But Helen, if you'd like to respond, thank you.
Yes, in terms of for the summer offering, it's that first site by pier approach. Sorry, by the pier. In terms of the structure itself, that will come through the tender process. So as part of the evaluation, we will look, and the concept has to be submitted, and then we would look at that structure and what was bringing in, and then assess it from there. So I can't give you that specific information at this stage, but I'm more than yeah, that helps.
Perhaps something out of that, George. I don't know whether this is what you're getting at. Were the concerns that the structure would be of the same size as the area? Was that perhaps a concern of yours, or obviously common sense would prevail there?
It does, because it seems a tremendous size of an area to give over to one pop-up restaurant facility, to deny other beach users either to walk along the beach, because there is a seawall there, so they would have to on the western side of the pier, they would have to climb up onto the promenade, continue along the promenade, and then drop down onto the beach again if they wanted to continue. At the moment, without any structure there, you could walk under the pier unimpeded, and then the seawall itself, you do a sort of dog leg around that, and then you continue along the beach. To my recollection of that particular area.
Okay. Well, I think.
But the question is valid. Is that would the local authority consider the whole 35 by 25 metres rough area to be covered by a pop-up restaurant?
That's the question. Okay, so if we could have a response to that, thank you.
Yes, that would cover any infrastructure as well. So there would always be the possibility, depending on the tide time for that specific time of year, is how deep you go. And as we know, the beach has been replenished recently. So in terms for licensing, we need to make sure that we've covered all those eventualities, but obviously the seafront does change, so you will always be able to do that walk through. In terms of the site itself, the infrastructure that would go in is very dependent on what comes in, but it would include any fencing of the area, it would include tables, your seating area, your toilet facilities, preparation area. So once that's in, so it would cover that area, yes, but it would be covered through infrastructure.
Yes, well, I think we're clear on that now. It's not going to be a great big shed covering the whole area. Thank you very much. Thank you for your question. Now, George, are there any further questions at this point for the applicant?
No, thank you, Chair. Very much appreciated.
Thank you very much. Councillor Burton.
Well, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to actually to follow up on the answer to the question that was nearly given, the square meterage, because I would be interested. And are both areas the same square meterage? Because we've talked about one or the other.
Okay, well, I'll leave Helen to get her calculator out, and perhaps she'll be able to advise us before the end of the meeting. Thank you very much, Councillor Burton, for your question. Okay, member, we now move on to questions. All members have asked their questions. We now move on to questions from our responsible authorities. Sergeant Gosling, did you have any questions?
I don't have any further questions. Thank you.
Okay, and now we move on to any questions by our representative, Mr. Chadwick.
Thank you. Can I ask Helen about the toilets? Will the operator be required to supply toilets within this designated area, or will users of the restaurant be expected to use the toilets that are within the pier facility?
Helen, can you respond, please? That's an easy one. Thank you.
Yes, the toilets are part of what they have to provide on site.
Thank you. And I just wanted to reiterate the comments that have already been made, that it does concern me that this is a very big area of one of the most popular parts of Bournemouth Beach. I hear what is said about the feeling that the restaurants are not big enough, but to solve that problem by taking up such a large area seems to me to create a nuisance in the sense of preventing people from using the beach that isn't really justified.
Thank you very much for that, Mr. Chadwick. Thank you very much. So thank you for your presentation, Helen. We'll now move on to responsible authorities. Sergeant Gosling, if you'd like to put your submission and again identify why you felt your conditions were necessary. Thank you, Sergeant Gosling.
Thank you very much, Chair. So I find myself here today discussing this application at peer approach, having had a significant amount of conversation and mediation with the applicant, and really I'm here to provide the committee with any context behind the conditions, 24 in total, that have been agreed between ourselves and the applicant, because it is, as has already been highlighted for already in the prior applications leading up to today, and also on today's application, it is quite difficult to create a schedule of conditions for a multi-use site, particularly one that, as has already been highlighted, is in a very busy area of the beach. However, we do feel that the 24 conditions that have been added will help the applicant to promote the licensing objectives. And whilst it's difficult to know without the license actually taking effect, if you do see it fit to do so, as applied for, it's difficult to see what the effect is, but I can assure you that we will monitor it. My team will be monitoring that premises amongst others, and we will respond accordingly. So if there are any concerns that the applicant isn't upholding the licensing objectives, then we'll be having those conversations with them. And of course, we've got all the options available to us, as has already been highlighted by Sarah Rogers previously. I don't have anything else to add at this time.
Thank you very much, Sergeant Gosling. So members, now it's an opportunity for you to ask any questions of Sergeant Gosling with regard to his conditions. Thank you, Councillor Hadley. You may be on mute, Councillor.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I was just organising myself. Thank you. And it relates to the issue that was raised on the previous one that was read out about advertising. And I just wonder whether it's given the other things in the area, whether it should be specifically mentioning alcohol, that they shouldn't be advertising alcohol rather than advertising anything, because it seems to be a very blanket condition about them advertising the fact they're serving food. But it doesn't, I appreciate from your answer to the previous one that it was about a concern about alcohol as part of the food offer. But do you feel that adding the word alcohol to the condition would be helpful? Thank you.
Thank you, Sergeant Gosling, if you'd like to respond.
Yes, and that's another. Well, all of these conditions are as I've already discussed in the previous submissions made in respect of the other licenses. They're all designed to help the applicant to uphold those licensing objectives. If the committee feel it appropriate to do so, I wouldn't have any objection to restricting that condition further to include only alcohol not being advertised. And perhaps it would be worthwhile speaking to Helen to see if that would be agreeable with her.
Okay, so the suggestion is there. This is condition 23, where it says you can't advertise anything in the locale. And Councillor Hadley, your suggestion there for consideration is just to restrict that to the not advertising alcohol. So this premise is here, you can get A, B, C and D, but not to mention that alcohol's available. That's okay, right, thank you. Well, the committee will take that on board. Thank you for your answer, Sergeant Gosling. Are there any further questions from members? No, thank you. Helen, as our applicant, do you have any questions for Sergeant Gosling?
No questions, thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Chadwick, any questions?
No questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chadwick. And Sarah, my apologies, I forgot to ask if you had questions for the previous speaker, but do you have any questions for Sergeant Gosling?
No, I have nothing to ask, nothing further to add, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So if that's all been covered then, we do have that point that Councillor Hadley's raised, which I've made a point of for our deliberations. Thank you. So now you all have the opportunity to sum up, and I will start with the person who spoke last to go first. And as I managed to get you to speak on this occasion, Sarah, I will ask you first, do you have anything further to add?
No, thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chadwick, as our remaining representative, would you like to summarise?
Yes, I have 2 points to make in my summary. One is that I accept there is a need for more eating facilities in the Bournemouth area, but to take up such a large area of the most popular piece of the beach is the wrong solution to the problem. And secondly, your legal advisor has said to you that the notices were valid, and I understood her to say because the plans are available on the web version of the register and the web version of the applications. She is mistaken in that. Neither the register nor the application register includes the plans. So for a person to discover what the plan is, they have to write or perhaps telephone the council to ask for them. And I cannot see that that is possibly compatible with Regulation 26. So whilst I'm not saying that I'm going to challenge this particular matter, I would ask that the committee puts the problem to the legal team at the council, ask them to consider very carefully the wording of that regulation for the future.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chadwick. I will ask for that to be triple checked because sometimes technically it may be there, but we just can't find it. But we'll just ask for that to be triple checked. And thank you very much for raising that extremely important point. Thank you very much for your contributions, Mr. Chadwick, for today and for yesterday. So now I will ask Sergeant Gosling if you'd like to summarise, please.
Yeah, sorry. Technical issues there. I don't have anything else particularly to add. I think like I've already highlighted and raised the committee. I think the 24 conditions are robust, and I feel that with continued working with the operators and the license holders, should this license application be granted, then I'm confident that we'll be able to encourage them to uphold the licensing objectives.
Thank you very much, Sergeant Gosling. That's extremely helpful. And now we move back to our applicant to summarise in finality. Thank you, Helen.
Yeah, thank you. So in summary, we are looking for a variation for this premise licence in relation to alcohol. This is something that we have tried and tested on this site through the Air Festival, where there's an existing licence in place for the 10 days. Everything goes through that rigorous plan that we've talked about, and that process and is constantly assessed as it goes through the safety advisory group and through our contract team, the seafront operations team that are on site. I do also have an answer for the approximate square meterage, if I can. So the area that we have been talking about closest to the pier is approximately 875 square metres of site. The area further on is actually that we're not planning on using for this purpose, but is already on the licence, is an area of 55 by 25 metres, which is approximately 1,375 square metres.
Okay, that's 1375, and the 375 square meterage. What is that in square root?
Oh, sorry, 875 is the square metres.
That's square meters. Yeah. Okay. Yes. Right. Lovely. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are you complete?
Yes. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. So I'll just have a quick check if any last minute hand raising. No, I think we're all covered. Well, thank you very much, everybody, for your contributions, and I will now conclude the hearing. And the committee will adjourn in private with the legal advisor and clerk to deliberate after this meeting. A notification of the committee's decision will be provided within the period of 5 working days, beginning with the day or the last day on which the hearing was held, in accordance with the regulations, which is today. And the notification decision will include information about the right of appeal as appropriate. And I'll just ask Ms Coulter if she'd kindly advise us about the right of appeal. Thank you, Ms Coulter.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, all parties, including those who have made representations from the public, are entitled to appeal against the decision if they are unhappy with it, and they must do so within 21 days of receiving the notice of that decision. And that's to the Magistrates' Court in writing, and details as to that right will be included in the notification when it's sent out. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. And just to conclude, I'd like to thank our presenting officers and our responsible reps and our applicant and our representative, Mr Chadwick, for your attention today and for your valuable contributions and for your assistance during the meeting to enable the licensing committee to go away now and deliberate and to come back with the best possible choice and decision that we can for all parties involved. So I will now conclude the hearing, and I will just ask all members, there is a deliberation room. You should have been sent an email. Can we just all check before we dash off that we have been sent the email? It is 12:25. I think we need a 15-minute break. Sorry to be so mean, but 15 minutes.